Welcome to the podcast that will teach you how to successfully invest in and build steady streams of passive income from the highly lucrative niche of mobile home park investing. Veteran real estate investors Kevin Bupp and Charles Dehart from Mobile Home Park Academy will personally share with you the valuable lessons they've learned along their journey as mobile home park investors, so that you too can learn how to build massive cash flow and huge profits from this extremely lucrative niche. So without further ado, let's welcome your hosts for today's show, Kevin Bupp and Charles Dehart.
Welcome, guys and gals, to the Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast, where we will provide you with all the information that you need to know how to successfully locate, negotiate, close on, and make huge profits from the lucrative niche of mobile home park investing. I'm Brian Spear, and I'm joined today by my co-host and Mobile Home Park Database wizard, Charles Dehart. How you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Everything's been going super awesome in the business. We've just brought on some 2 new employees, and they've been working with them, for the past few weeks, and everything's been awesome.
Yeah, exciting times in the office, man. I couldn't agree more. Just brought on some really high quality, talented individuals, and we'll need to bring on some more here in the near future as we continue to scale. But man, I couldn't be more excited as well. So I guess we should say something about Kevin, right? I mean, he's not here. I think it might be the first time in a long time that Kevin will not be partaking in a podcast. For those listening, he's actually out traveling the country. He's visiting several of the parks in our portfolio. As we mentioned, we recently onboarded a new director of operations, and Kevin is working in tandem with him to kind of guide him through the portfolio and show him the ropes, as it were. So just wanted to make everybody aware that he'll be back in the near future, but you're going to have to deal with us just today. Okay, guys? First, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. A brief Fund 2 update. We launched Fund 2 to those outside of our current base of legacy investors last week for the first time. And man, the response has just been extremely well received. It's been great. We have $4 million in commitments on the fund thus far. And to those with whom I have not yet spoken, I am anxiously anticipating and awaiting our conversation. I'm looking forward to speaking to each and every one of you individually. So please be patient as we work through the inbound response that we've received from all of you guys. It's been great. Next, we're hiring a few folks. Charles, you want to dive into that?
Yeah, we're right now we're looking for two additional team members to work in our operations department, working directly with our director of operations to sort of help him out. We're buying a lot of properties these days. We've got 9 or 10 under contract. We put 3 under contract this week. As of the recording of this podcast. Between the last podcast and this one, it's been 3 properties under contract. So we're super busy, and we know that we need more people, and we want to fill those roles with them. So we're looking for 2 people to join our ops team. And in addition to that, we're looking for someone who can sort of take the reins of our broker campaigns and also help us with inbound owner traffic that's coming our way. Right now, Kevin and another acquisitions associate that works alongside Kevin, but the need has arisen to build that team even further. So we're looking for someone to help us on the acquisition side as well.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? We have too many off-market leads coming through the pipeline, but it is a problem nonetheless. And we need to have people that can facilitate those transactions on our behalf. So, if I could clone you, Charles, and just have 10 Charles running around, then we would have the most amazing database in the history of mankind. In a similar vein, if I could clone Kevin and just make 10 little Kevins running around, I know he has 2 already with Jackson and Julian, but if I could clone the man himself, then I would just have him speak to owners all day, every day. Unfortunately, we only have so many hours. And for that reason, we need some additional folks to kind of help us in that vein, in that regard. So with that, moving on, guys, it would be great if you would subscribe to the podcast. Please leave a rating and review. I know we say this every single week, but it really, truly does help provide you with more value. I'll just echo Kevin's refrain. People come onto the show only if they see some really high quality statistics and high quality ratings and reviews. And that allows us to onboard additional talent, really solid folks, to provide you with better value. So if you'd be so kind as to leave a rating and review, it'd be very much appreciated. With that, today we're going to be discussing the first of a 3-part series that should hopefully help you solve some problems as you try to launch your business, try to springboard your own personal portfolio and try to grow in the mobile home park industry. The first show today, we're going to be discussing the broker campaign. And as you will come to find out, the broker campaign in our eyes, it's something that we created organically. And it was really, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And we had so many deals coming through the pipeline, we ran out of time to handle these on our own personally. So we had to create something that would allow us to handle that traffic. And we'll discuss that in detail on today's podcast. Our next show is going to be about picking your markets and selecting the areas in which you would like to acquire mobile home parks. That's vitally important whenever you're seeking to go out and purchase any real estate, especially mobile home parks. And then the third show that we're going to be rolling out in the near future is a show that is backed by high demand. It's going to be a show on databasing. And Charles referenced this in the show a couple weeks back. And we've had several different folks with inbound responses conveying, please walk us through how to go about creating that database. You guys talk about it all the time. So Charles will dig deep on that in an upcoming episode. So with that, Charles, today we're going to be focusing on how to get a broker to work with you when you're just getting started. This was a problem that you faced several years back when you were just getting started in the industry and you were not getting taken seriously by the local brokers. So how did you resolve that? That was a problem for you. If you could just run through some of the challenges you saw when you were trying to break into the industry, explain to the folks what you did to try to resolve that.
Sure. Yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, a lot of the brokers that I was working with early on, they rightfully so probably weren't really that excited to work with someone who was new. And I definitely experienced that when I called brokers. But really that's something that's going to be a reality for pretty much anyone who's getting started in any industry. It doesn't even matter if it's this one. People who are professionals in the industry, they already have professional clients. So when you come in, it's very difficult to get your foot in the door. So I'm going to give you a brief background on sort of how I got started. Is the first thing that I did when I got started in this industry was I started by building a mobile home park database. That was, in my eyes, that was the most important thing that I needed to do to get started. It's a little bit time consuming, and I'm kind of one of those people who like to get results immediately. So I started out, obviously doing the database, but in the meantime, I was also contacting industry brokers. So pretty easy to do. You just go on the internet and they're easy to find. And so usually about once every couple of days, I would try to make contact with a new broker and quickly, very, very quickly realized, as many of you probably have, that in doing so, you really get humbled quite quickly in how new you are and how difficult it might be to get started through that avenue. I think the one that really hit me hard was it was a broker. I'm not going to name any names, but it was a broker in Alabama. And maybe some of you guys have actually experienced this because I've talked about this. I think you actually experienced this broker too, Brian, way back in the day. But I called him up.
I've had several.
Yeah. I called him up and started the introduction and went through sort of what I was looking for, and he immediately started yelling at me for calling him because I was, he could probably just sense that I was, brand new. I mean, I hadn't even been interested in mobile home parks for much more than maybe a month or so, but he definitely picked up on it and made sure I never called him again is basically what he did. And that was sort of how this broker initiative that we're going to go through today sort of started is pretty much immediately after that phone call. I decided that maybe the best course of action with the brokers, maybe not work with industry brokers at this stage in the game where I was at. And so what I decided to do was I went home. I was at that time, I think most people listening know that I was doing overseas contracting work for the State Department. So I went home on leave, and I went to a local real estate office. It was a real estate agent that my family had worked with in the past. And I went there and I told them that I wanted to buy a mobile home park. And what I was going to do is I was going to drive the market and I was going to bring them, the 4 or 5 parks I was interested in, see if they could help me make contact to those owners. And overall that, I wasn't yelled at or I was taken, at least somewhat seriously. So it would already started off on the right foot from my perspective. So what I did after that, the next action step for me at that point, I hadn't built a database of that area yet. So what I did was I drove around and I found it was 4 mobile home parks that I thought were ones that I would like to own. So I brought her. What I did is I got those parks. I went down to county records and asked them to show me who owned those parks. And I brought that list of names back to the broker. And the results of that, it took a little bit of time, but the results of that were that local broker actually knew some of those people, knew 2 of them, didn't know they owned those parks. They had no idea that they owned those parks. This was a single family home broker. And ultimately, I was able to get in front of 2 sellers. What we did was she arranged a meeting in her office, and I was able to come to that meeting and really start the negotiations process right then and there, face to face with those two owners. And ultimately wound up putting one of those parks under contract. It was almost too good to be true, too easy from my perspective, considering what I had been through with other brokers in the past. And that's why, all of us here at Sunrise think that as far as getting started with brokers, this right here is probably something that's going to help you have the most amount of success in the least amount of time. And that's why we're bringing it to you on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo the sentiment. And it's really not a slight on those industry brokers that have been doing this for several decades. They do a great job. They really do. I mean, the difference, however, is that they've built a buyer's list that is 250 people deep, especially in today's markets where cap rates are compressed and they're selling for really kind of gaudy prices. They don't need to spend time with somebody who's brand new in the industry. For that reason, you're going to need to do something a little bit different to grab the attention of a broker or potentially go find that good old boy network in a local environment, exactly like Charles just outlined, to find somebody who's a little bit more receptive to your goal. Again, it's not a slight on those larger brokers. Everyone on a day-to-day basis has to determine how to best spend their time. There are only so many hours in the day. And that industry broker, his time is not best spent on the phone with somebody who's brand new, getting their foot, who's wet behind the ears. It's just not. So you need to get creative. You need to find out a different avenue that will allow you to ultimately achieve your goal. And your goal, assumably, is to go in and actually acquire mobile home parks. So get creative. And that's really, again, what this show is all about. If you don't have the personal time to go out and do every sort of off-market unique strategy that we've outlined historically, meaning cold call campaigns, direct mail campaigns, this is another avenue through which you can get in front of a mobile home park owner and leverage somebody's credibility when you're just getting started. So you can lean on the success and the credibility of a 20-year veteran in real estate, even if it's a residential agent or a residential broker. That at least gets your foot in the door to put you face to face with that mobile home park owner so that you can begin that conversation. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of what it's going to take in the early stages of your business is going to be hustle and creativity. That's how you're going to get it done. The easiest way is going to be, the database, but this broker campaign that you can engage in sort of in your local markets or even outside of your local markets can also be highly effective. We've closed a number of transactions through both strategies. And, what I can tell you is that I think that you'll find a lot more enjoyment working with brokers who you've sort of positioned it in a way that they're helping you. I think that's really, really valuable.
Yeah, agreed entirely. And, you outlined the story on really what created this idea organically. But it's kind of changed over time, right? It's kind of changed from the original outline that you had. And when we ultimately continue to scale at our organization, it subtly shifted. The idea itself is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's rock solid. The proof is in the pudding. But, we wanted to systemize that process and scale it so that we can have it flourish throughout our entire database. And that's what I was tasked with several years ago when I first came on board. So you guys said, we have a really phenomenal idea here. It's something that we've been successful in putting deals under contract, but we need to systemize it throughout the entire database and ultimately tasked me with that process. And I sat down and put pen to paper in an effort to try to delegate this out to two different folks. And we'll walk through that system in its current version today for you guys so that if you have an interest, you can implement that in your own business. I'll step back here and say, what is the goal? The goal here is to buy a park. Again, we've said this ad nauseum for many years. How do you buy a park? There's really a couple of keys in this. You need to build rapport with the seller, and you need to contact the seller at the right time. Of course, you want to use all the different marketing strategies that are available to you, direct mail, cold call campaigns. But why would you not use this as well, the broker initiative? All of them are going to require multiple touches throughout a long period of time. Every single aspect is going to require persistence, so on and so forth. So just know that you're going to have many, many hills to climb over the next several years if you really, truly do want to achieve your goal here. So just know that at the outset, this is a long game, but if you do it right and you put the work in and the time and effort, you're ultimately going to be able to achieve your goals in that regard. But as mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, it was something where we had time constraints individually. As Charles continued to build the database, we started here in the Southeast and continued to build it throughout the Midwest, Northeast, all the way out to just now past the Oklahoma line. We're about halfway through the country. And we know that the amount of owners that we have in the database, we personally, the principals, cannot spend our time on the phone every single day with those owners. We would be unable. Some of those leads would fall through the cracks. We would be unable to spend the amount of time on the phone with them suitable to really continue to massage and facilitate those relationships and cultivate those relationships with the end goal of creating a transaction. So how do we solve that problem? We do so through quickly scaling using the broker initiative. If Charles just outlined using one broker, right? If we were to do this in multiple different markets, we've already created a database. Let's just use a hypothetical example, say that we've targeted a respective MSA and we've got 15 communities that we're willing to buy inside that community. And we find the right broker. We dig deep and we find the right industry broker in that area that makes sense for us. Maybe not mobile home park specific, likely has some commercial experience, but definitely is the right guy for this respective task. If we give him these 15 leads and we have him go out and reach out to those 15 owners on our behalf on an ongoing basis over many, many years, it's a long-term commitment. If we do that in 15 different MSAs, all of a sudden we have another 225 leads in our database that are continuing to grow, that are continuing to be cultivated and fostered over time. So it's a very easy way to scale your business in a short period of time. So the next question would be, how do you actually go out and pick your broker? As Charles had mentioned, you can't just call up the guys that are rock stars in the industry that have transacted millions and millions of dollars of manufactured housing and say, I want to go buy a park. You'll receive the same scorn that Charles did when he first reached out, okay? So you have to do a little bit of research personally to find out somebody that works for you. Why would a broker want to work with you on this venture? Because all they really care about is actually getting a deal sold. Getting a deal sold, that's what puts food on the table for them. And there are three things in every transaction that need to occur for him to feed his family. First, he needs to go research all of the commercial real estate prospects that are in his vicinity, that are in his area. Who are all the commercial real estate owners in the area? Find out all those individuals. The second is he needs to go convince that owner to sell. And then the third, he needs to find buyers for that listing. The reason that these folks are receptive to our idea is because we've already knocked out two of those three things. We're literally giving him the leads. We're giving him the leads in advance. We've done all the work in advance. We've created a database. We found the owners. We found the personal information. We're giving him the leads, and they already have the buyer on the back end. We're ready and willing and able to acquire that park as soon as you convince that owner to sell. That is the only thing that he needs to do. So they're obviously very receptive to this idea. So with that, now who would we be looking for when we go out and do an MSA and we try to find the right broker? We want to find somebody who's going to be committed for the long term. The worst thing that can happen is that you spend thousands of dollars creating this database, tons of hours and time and energy putting into creating the database, and then you give these leads to somebody without doing sufficient due diligence on that broker. And he squanders those leads, just calls them out of the blue. They're not interested, hangs up, goes a different direction. They just squandered all of the time and energy and effort that you put into building that database. So you need to underwrite that respective local broker just to make sure that he's the right guy. That individual, he needs to have pre-existing relationships. It's great if he's been there for 10, 20, 30 years. He has pre-existing relationships. I've had many, many times where I've tried to call and research respective brokers in the vicinity. And he goes, oh yeah, no, I know 6 of the brokers. I know 6 of the mobile home park owners already. No, we go to lunch every month. That is the guy that you want to work with because he already has that pre-existing relationship. They do not necessarily need specific mobile home park industry experience. Okay. You're not going to find a lot of guys that specialize in this niche, and the guys that do don't have time for you today. With that said, it's great if they have commercial experience. Guys that, have done development, guys that have done retail, office, whatever the case may be, multifamily. If they have some of that experience, it's preferred. It's also great if they've got a long duration in the industry and they're deeply rooted in that local market. One of the main aspects is building rapport with the owner. So if that individual has been in that respective MSA, hopefully his entire life, or potentially 10, 20, 30 years, building relationships with those commercial real estate prospects in the area, well, then hopefully he knows the guy who eats lunch every day with the mobile home park owner you're targeting. That is the way to just begin to establish that rapport with that owner. Try to tap into that good old boy network, especially in some of the regional mid-market cities. That's the way to get your foot in the door. So in terms of tracking these guys down, how do you track them down? You find them online, just like anybody else. You can hire VAs to go scrape through yellowpages.com and Google. You search LoopNet, find all the recently closed commercial transactions over the past couple of years. Find out who's active there. Maybe not an industry powerhouse, but find out somebody that meets all the aforementioned criteria that I just laid out. You can speak to local attorneys, so on and so forth. And then you just create a list, rank them according to all the different bios that they have online, ring them up, give them a call, find out what that rapport is like with you. You guys are going to be working together for years. You need to know if you guys are going to be a good fit. And if you are, great. If you're not, so be it. There's likely going to be several different folks with whom you could work in that area.
Yeah, Brian. I don't want to interrupt here, but I want to kind of tie this back to sort of reverse engineering the story that we started with. Is when you talk about rapport with a broker, one of the there's 2 ways to position, right? You can position it as you're going to be able to make some money, but that doesn't really distinguish you as a client. What distinguishes you as a client and the way that you should frame the conversation with a broker is you're saving them a ton of time. You're not going through generalized criteria of what you're going to buy. You're actually giving them a list of what you'd be interested in buying. So if they can get you in the door with the owner on those properties, they already know you have an interest in those properties specifically. It's hugely valuable from a time standpoint for a broker. And one of the problems, this is something you'll see with industry brokers, one of the problems they have is time. That's true for all brokers. Everyone in real estate, their biggest problem is not necessarily money, it's usually time. They don't have the time that, they have to get rid of the time wasters so they can fill their calendar up with people who aren't going to waste their time. And if you're one of those people who aren't going to waste their time, it's a really great way to start that relationship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Guys that call up and are tire kickers, man, that's just going to drive somebody mad. And that's exactly what your first initial conversation was like when you reached out to that industry broker, right? He thought you were a tire kicker. You're wasting my time. And that's the type of response you're going to get. It's not going to be pretty. So you've got to position yourself from a position of power when you speak to these folks. I have the leads. I'm giving you 15 leads for free here. That is speaking from a position of power, and it helps them understand that you mean business. It's definitely a different sort of conversation then. So again, moving a little bit further here, when you're underwriting these brokers to determine whether or not they're the right fit, again, make sure that you're speaking from a position of power, truly. You're going to require them to do certain things in order to get these free leads. That's really what you're doing. You're giving them free opportunities here. So you're going to require that they reach out to these owners once every couple of months. You're going to require them just verbally. I mean, I want to hear them say, Yes, I will send direct mail to this individual every 3 months. That is a commitment. If somebody's not willing to pay 10, 15, 20 bucks to send out a couple of mailers on a periodic basis to touch base and follow up with owners, then they're probably not the right guy for me. Because if we can make a transaction occur, he's going to make tens and tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars here. If you can't drop 15 bucks to go send some direct mail, then maybe we wouldn't be the best fit. So assuming you have the right fit, you've got the right broker, you then instruct them to go back to the mobile home park owner and get information from them. Build rapport from the mobile home park owner, find out if they have any interest in selling today. If not, find out what that timeline looks like. And always they're trying to peel information from the owner to determine what the value of that property might be and gauge the interest from the seller's perspective. We basically convey to each broker that we have 2 levels of due diligence that we want you to gather on our behalf. We really have 3, but the third one is once we're under contract. So we give them 2 due diligence tiers. The first one is unbelievably simple. Everyone in the world would be able to provide this information, assuming you're a mobile home park owner. How many spaces do you have? How many spaces have homes? How many vacant homes do you have? What is your average lot rent? Very basic. What's your park-owned home rent? You know, what are you on city water, city sewer? Or are you on a well and septic, wastewater treatment plant, whatever the case may be? And then who pays water and sewer? Those sorts of questions, very high level, 10,000 foot view. That's tier 1 due diligence. If we have those numbers, then we can get a ballpark. We have a ballpark idea of what that community might be valued at. And we can go back to the broker and say, look, we don't have every piece of information here, but we kind of have an idea of what our interest might be. So if you can gauge his interest, this is, likely the range where we would be on a purchase price based on all the information you provided us. Because we just there's industry metrics that are just standard. If you just throw a standard multiple and you throw a standard expense ratio on the community, you'll have a gauge, an idea, at least something to try to get the ball moving forward. And then if you have a pretty amenable seller, then we would ask that they provide tier 2 due diligence, which is simply a rent roll and a profit and loss statement. The rent roll is going to confirm the tenancy, actually prove the folks are actually in there paying rent on a month-to-month basis, and the P&L will convey the upside that is possible in the operations. As you guys are well aware, there's a lot of communities out there that are not operated as efficiently as they could be. We've acquired communities that have a payroll of 6 figures when it should be $30,000, maybe $35,000. That's a $70,000 upside in NOI relatively shortly after acquisition. So those opportunities are seen and pretty readily apparent in the P&L. If an owner is a little bit unwilling or skeptical about providing the financials, be sure that you tell the broker we're willing to provide a confidentiality agreement, and they, as an owner, will be better off by providing those financials to us, because we can then provide them with a better offer. If we don't have that information and the clarity in advance, well, then we have to bake in that risk. There's risk associated with it, so we're going to throw out a significantly lower offer. But if we have more information, we have more clarity, we can give you a better offer. So that's just a way that you can hopefully peel some of that information from the owner to try to get the ball moving down the road a little bit further. I guess another topic that pops up in these conversations with brokers is how they get paid. Everyone else is always looking out for the best interest, and rightfully so. So invariably, when you're having these conversations with brokers, they'll wonder how they're going to get paid. If they're serving as a middleman here, am I really the seller's broker? Am I the buyer's broker? Who am I? How am I getting paid? Just be extremely clear with them. Let them know that you're flexible. To a large degree, the seller is really going to pay one way or another. Either you're going to pay them a higher price and the seller is then going to pay the commission, or you're going to lower the purchase price accordingly. If you're forced to pay the buyer's brokerage commission, then you're going to pay a lower purchase price accordingly. So really, you can be flexible here. Let them know, let the broker know, and the broker can work his magic and have that conversation and massage that with the owner, however he so chooses. But ultimately, it's a numbers game from your perspective. We're seeking a certain cash-on-cash return, a certain equity multiple, a certain internal rate of return, and we'll adjust our acquisitions price accordingly based on who's paying that commission.
One of the things I wanted to maybe jump back in, I don't want to take you off your game, Brian, or ruin your train of thought here, but with this, there's always going to be unspoken objections. There'll be spoken and unspoken, but one of the things that you can do to handle a very, very common unspoken objective or objection for a broker in this case, one of their objections is going to be, what happens if you don't want to buy it? They might not come out and tell you that, but you need to have something prepared for them, even when they don't say this, because it does position you as, again, the right person to work with. Is the thing that I always did was I let them know up front that if we weren't interested in buying that property, I would help them find a buyer for that property. I always wanted to be the first one they called, but if I passed on it, I wouldn't just leave them hanging there. I would actually go and help them, show them where to go to potentially get this property sold. One of the problems that they're going to have is that 9 times out of 10, you're going to be it's going to be positioned as a seller's or a buyer's broker, right? Most sellers who are contacted this way by a broker that's, sort of positioning the opportunity this way, they're going to view them as a broker as being your broker as a buyer. So they're a buyer's broker. So, it's always worthwhile to try to help that broker in any way, shape, or form that they can get paid, even if you're not the one that's going to close it. It just continues that great relationship into the future, and it continues the ability for this to be something that works long term.
Yeah, I absolutely. And a perfect example of that exact scenario is New York. New York, we have a broker over in New York that we've been working with for some time. And the original deal that we'd reached out about it didn't work. It didn't work. It fell through. But the rapport that we had built with him and the manner in which we fostered and cultivated that relationship was such that upon providing him with further deals, he ultimately was able to work with an owner in the vicinity, and we ended up buying a deal last November, out of this exact broker initiative. So, this stuff really does work, guys. We have another one that just went under contract last week that is a result of the broker initiative. So, again, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but if you put in the time and effort and you establish those relationships over the long term, invariably you'll see success as long as you're persistent in your efforts. Mm-hmm. I guess one of the last things that I wanted to say, guys, here is on a side note. We just walked through every reason why you should probably work with, brokers that you choose personally that aren't industry experts, that aren't industry professionals. But if you really wanted to grab somebody's attention, I had a great story that I had seen recently. If I were to go try to get my foot in the door at Warren Buffett's office or Jeff Bezos' office or whomever, I'm going to try to do something very unique. What you do is you go out and you buy a box, a FedEx box. You bring it in-house and you ship it to that individual. And inside that box, when he opens it up, is a little note, and there is a shoe. And it says, "I just got one foot in the door. Give me a call. My name is Brian. I'm looking to buy a mobile home park in your area," or whatever the case may be. The point is, what is the sort of direct mail response rate you're going to get on such a unique message such as that? It's going to be 100%. You're at least going to get one call out of that to try to move the ball forward, guys. The point is, just be creative. Real estate is it's a niche where you must be infinitely creative and entrepreneurial to move the ball forward to ultimately achieve your goals. This is not a short-term game. It's certainly not a get-rich-quick sort of scenario. It is certainly a build wealth over the long time business. And as long as you have the time, effort, persistence, and energy, you certainly will be able to achieve that. But hopefully this podcast has shared some insights and maybe a couple golden nuggets that you can glean and take back into your own business to help you further your career as you progress here. With that, the next podcast that we're going to be doing next week is going to be on your markets. Obviously, this is extremely important anytime that you buy any sort of real estate, but especially mobile home parks.
Also, as Charles mentioned earlier, our team is growing. We are in the midst of hiring. We're looking to onboard some high-quality, talented folks. Over the past couple of years, we've used a few different avenues to bring people on board. But we feel that it's likely best to provide the folks that listen to our podcast the opportunity to join our team first. These folks understand us. They know us. They understand the business model. So if you're one of those folks that have been listening and you feel as though you might be a really good fit here in Clearwater to help us springboard the growth of our organization, if that sounds like you, we want to hear from you. Head over to careers.sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. It's a landing page where you can put in a little bit of your information. You'll be prompted to send us a resume, and that will get the ball rolling. But we would love to hear from you. It is extremely likely that we will be hiring more folks that have reached out to us from the podcast over the next several months here. If you feel like you be that guy, I should say guy or gal, please reach out to us, okay? And lastly,
I want to reiterate one final time, guys. Please, if you'd be so kind to subscribe, leave a rating and review. It really, really, truly does benefit you in the long term. It allows us to bring on bigger, better guests. So please, if you would be so kind, it'd be very, very much appreciated. Charles, do you have anything else, bud? I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah, I just going back to your story on the shoes, I'm actually pretty interested to see how many of the industry brokers that we work with on a daily basis are going to start getting a bunch of shoes. So that'll be fun for me.
I wonder if we're going to get some. Yeah, I wonder if we're going to get some angry mail here in the near future from some of our buddies. But we'll see. We'll see. But if that's it, man, I don't have anything else. Charles, you good?
I'm good, man.
All right. Well, with that, guys, I'll let you go. So until next time, guys, be great.
Congratulations for taking the necessary steps to achieving massive success through the highly lucrative niche of mobile home park investing. Be sure to visit our website, mobilehomeparkacademy.com, to download your free digital ebook version of the 21 biggest mistakes investors make when buying their first mobile home park and how you can avoid them. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our free monthly mobile home park investing newsletter, which is jammed full of valuable tips, tricks, and strategies to help you accelerate your path to success as a mobile home park investor. More information about this podcast and its hosts can be found by visiting mobilehomeparkacademy.com.